thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. It's great to be here. And this is actually one of my last engagement as a Vice-Chancellor. And I was going to refer to it as my swan song, except now in the sector, we only talk about black and green swans. So I'm not going to mention swans at all. And I'm just going to say that I'm actually counting the sleeps because I will be standing down on Friday next week. And it's when I announced it to staff, there was some trepidation. I fear that people would stand up and cheer, but they didn't, to be honest. And so it's been an incredibly exciting ride, and I use a lot of metaphor, and certainly Starship Swinburne is flying high, and the fact that the booster is going to fall any minute will not prevent the spaceship from going on. So I want to kind of just share a few impressions, or perhaps a few things that I've learned along the way, primarily through the people lens, because I think one of the things that was referred to before was my very strong dedication to strategic vision and then a disciplined delivery of a strategy. And I often refer to strategy as the Excalibur, because we are in an environment where everybody is just so smart. They always come up with incredibly good ideas. And your job as a leader is really to be kind of almost an idea slayer. And you've got to kind of come out with the Excalibur saying, is it on strategy? And if it is, let's go all in. And if it's not, I'm sorry, it's a great idea, but we're not going to do it. Which doesn't make you popular, but actually makes for delivery of strategy. And so I'm going to sort of perhaps riff a little bit about that. Now, you have to remember that when I arrived at Swinburne, I started on day 1 of stage 4 lockdown. And I had driven all the way from Adelaide to come here to be with my people here at Swinburne, and I found that my people were actually nowhere to be seen. Because everybody was on the Mornington Peninsula or in the Dandenong, and I was the only mug in town with my dog. But it did do something that I think I would never have been able to achieve without a pandemic. It needed to be a conversation that would leverage technology in order to make the voice of people heard. And so it was actually a demonstration, a case study of how technology and people could work together. And there was my vision straight there. There was my mission statement without having to work too hard at it. We were going to be the university where technology and people would work together to build a better world. And that conversation, which was driven by a technology platform, was actually something that I could not have hoped to provoke with face-to-face conversation or with lectures or whatever else. The fact that people were at home and that there was this opportunity to participate in a conversation meant that everybody was in. There was no longer any Brahmins and Dalits in my place. There were no, professors who had a voice and then kind of lecturers who had to shut up and take it. There were no professionals kept on the outside and academics who prevailed. We were all in, and we were all having a legitimate voice to try and determine what was making us different and how different did we want to be in the future. And it's true to say that I had some inklings before I came, but that's because I had just spent 6 months looking at the numbers, looking at what Swinburne was doing, remembering what Swinburne was aiming to do some years before, and looking at the sector from somebody who had been in the sector for many decades, and looking at what I felt was a homogenization of the sector that was unfortunate. Everybody was trying to get bigger because everybody assumed that bigger was better. And so then come the kind of the insatiable appetite. And I was in a group of 8, but one that was not so greedy, or was hungry, more to the point. But everybody was assuming that size resolved everything. And when I came to Swinburne, I was very determined to really demonstrate that excellence could come regardless of size, as long as you had a focus and a discipline. Now, I'm a consumer behavior with a marketing background. There's not too many VCs with that sort of background. It turns out that it's incredibly relevant to what we're going to be discussing about. So this conversation was about 6 weeks during sort of September, October of 2020. And then I took it all on board. There was no AI available, and I just had to digest about 5,000 pages of written comments. And that's where we came up with Horizon 2025. And literally people said, right, she's lost it again, which is what people said when I started inviting students to be part of the architecture team in devising a learning hub at the University of Adelaide. People say, oh, she's gone crazy again. That idea of really distilling a lot of feedback into something that was so different that no other university could say, we're just going to change the title and it'll be our strategy. Nobody could do that because our strategy was about 4 moonshots, and the 4 moonshots were a representation of who Swinburne believed themselves to be and the appetite and the ambition of what they wanted to be. So the first moonshot, which was that everybody would get a learning experience that reflected our belief in learning by doing, we were already almost there, but to crystallize it in that way was a perfect way of bringing our colleagues from the vocational into the conversation with the higher education, because we all believed in learning by doing, and by promising and committing to actually deliver a work-integrated learning in every single program by 2025. Boy, that got everybody really to pay attention. And of course, we achieved it. That moonshot was actually the one that we landed 18 months ahead of schedule. The second one was actually also a statement of fact that we wanted every graduate to have a job, and we were starting from a place of strength, because actually at Swinburne, only 25% of our students come from year 12. Everybody else is already working. So, it's not difficult to promise that you won't lose your job if you study with us. The third one, of course, was one of really strong conviction that we needed to co-create with industry as well. So we needed to be the partner of industry, not just in providing the technology solution that they needed for their business, but also in providing the workforce that was so essential, because most of the industry partners, when they come and talk to you, they know the technology is out there. They know somebody is going to be able to deliver it to them. What they don't know is whether they'll have the workforce that can make it work for their business. So the talent, the human capital development piece is just as essential for the legitimacy of universities. And then the fourth one was a moonshot that nobody could get. And this was, let's all sign up for amnesia. Let's forget what Oxford and Cambridge look like. We don't care. Let's forget what Melbourne looks like. We don't care. They'll always be better at being the University of Melbourne than we will be. We're going to be the prototype of the university that the future needs us to be. And that was the one that people really struggled with, because in some ways they wanted me to tell them, what does it look like? Tell me what does it look like? And I said, I don't know, it's a prototype, right? So it's a prototype of the future. I don't live in the future. I know the future is different. Let's do it together. But that notion of uncertainty was really, the rest was very transparent. People could get it. But that fourth one really got people kind of worried in some ways. Now, the good thing about the moonshots is, in addition to the narrative, it's always nicer to tell a story. So, Starship Swinburne, and we're kind of lifting off, and we are just going to achieve the moonshot, and we're going there because it's hard, and no, we don't know how, this is me channeling Kennedy. The point was, there was a story there, and there was something that people could grab hold of. And it was something that they could then talk amongst themselves. The 4 moonshots became part of the vocabulary. And then when I had to say no to things, and that included language, we were teaching language. We had Italian and Japanese. We had 60 students and 6 staff. And we decided that was not part of the future. We also had a school of circus. Now, I did go and talk to the people from the Circus Institute, and I said, do you want to tell me what the circus that has technology and the future in it, what does it look like? And they went, oh, not really, no, we quite like trapeze and juggling, and okay, but that's fine. I'll find you a good home. And the Institute of Circus Art is now with Collart and doing exceedingly well, but it didn't belong to the Swinburne universe because it was not on strategy. And so, as I said, I've used the strategy and the moonshots as a very effective Excalibur. When people came up with great idea, I'd say, is that getting us closer to one of the moonshots? And if the answer is no, well, you've got your answer. I don't need to explain to you why I'm going to say no. I don't need to explain to you why we're not going to fund it. I don't need to explain why we're not going to recruit people to do it, because it's not getting us near to where we want to be. So there's a great deal of benefit that come from having the credibility of that engagement. That was authentic, that was transparent. Everybody who wanted to speak knew that they'd comment was going to be listed and read by other people. The people who chose not to speak knew that they hadn't, so therefore they could not actually say that they didn't have a chance. So there was something quite wonderfully affirming in being able to devise that strategy, which we launched really pretty much as Melbourne was reopening, or thinking it was reopening. Didn't quite reopen then, but at least we had a strategy and then a common language, which was really useful. So that strategy was really a useful thing to have at a time of incredible challenges. There was something good about that clarity and the fact that so many people had provided input into it. But perhaps more importantly than the fact that we delivered on all of these things within the time frame, it was an instrument by which we build confidence. I often said to my colleague that what I found when I came to Swinburne, in addition to the deflation that came from COVID and being in Melbourne in lockdown and all the rest of it, was this notion of perhaps a degree of learned helplessness. And what people needed, first and foremost, was to be given confidence in their capacity to dream big and to then chase it. And so that confidence that was built through Horizon 2025 was really essential for what has happened since, which is, of course, the launch of the next strategic plan. Now, the co-creation in practice, as I described, was using the digital element, and it was very much at the time of the pandemic. So when we started to think about the next strategic plan, I was very keen to kind of not do the same thing again. I wanted the digital platform, but I wanted to also invite all those people that may have felt that they were missed from the process because they were less comfortable, which is ironic because, of course, everybody kept their job because of the digital capability. But I wanted to kind of really expand that shared ownership to all of our areas. Now, I'm probably best known for the person that introduced co-creation with students at the University of Adelaide with the Learning Hub. I wanted to demonstrate what co-creation with staff really could look like. And so this is what we did with Ad Astra on steroids. And Ad Astra, which is the strategic plan that we launched before Christmas last year, was actually about using the Swinburne Unlimited technology platform, so that was still there. I was very clear in disclosing that we would use AI, so I said, go and write as much stuff as you want, because I will not be reading it. I will be reading what AI tells me are the emerging themes from it. And that meant, in terms of volume, it was just enormous. But then what we did, which we could not do in the previous iteration, is we had physical space where we would actually reflect back what the themes were, and then people could actually validate or argue or nuance what it is that AI was saying people had been saying. And that was really useful, because I'll give an example. We ended up with 4 quantum leaps by popular vote. I didn't pick quantum leaps. We had a number of names. I said, it can't be moonshots. You only land on the moon once. After that, you go to the stars. So Ad Astra was a pretty obvious title for the strategic plan, but we couldn't have moonshots. So people went, And then we had a number of lists, and then I was not going to pick it. So we put the list and we had a vote. And over 50% of people actually voted, these are quantum leaps. Then I got into this deep conversation with our physicists to say, you do realize quantum leaps are very small. And I went, no. For us, it's going to be either we succeed or we don't. So small or big, quantum leaps are us, right? So the quantum leaps really came from that conversation. But initially, AI told us there were 5 pillars to the next strategy. Because one of them, bless them, one of them was this prototype thing. One of them was about wanting to be at the leading edge, wanting to be brave and entrepreneurial and taking the risk of failing. We are the only university that provides every year a Vice-Chancellor's Award for failing forward. Like, we actually acknowledge people who say, yep, tried that, stuffed it up, this is what I've learned. So that notion of being the prototype that was so unclear and so uncertain for people at the start of Horizon 2025, by the time we were building up Ad Astra, had become something that they really wanted to hold on to. They loved the idea of being a prototype. And then the feedback that we got, we had the Sky Lounge with posters and people were interacting with it. And the feedback, very strongly, was actually we want to be the prototype in everything we do. So it's not a separate thing, it's us. We are the prototype across everything we do. So we ended up with 4 quantum leaps, which is not, this is not me trying to have 4 things again. It just happened that way. And those quantum leaps are different from the moonshot because rather than being very vertical in what they intend to do, they're very transversal. So they require us to be one Swinburne and not to think in terms of vertical silos, which is a really important thing for us to be successful. And so the quantum leap one is to deliver personalized pathway to success. Now, for a learner, that may mean a bachelor. For most learners, it doesn't. It might mean something else. And for SMEs who come to talk to us, success is being able to leverage the technology and recruit the right talent to do it. Or it might be staff wanting to start up a business and us assisting them. So a personalized pathway to success is our quantum leap one. The quantum leap two is actually necessary for quantum leap one to be delivered, and that's to lean into the technology. So for instance, I heard people before talking about banning AI. I've banned banning. You are not allowed to ban AI at Swinburne. I had 30% of academics saying, oh, it's cheating. And I went, if you are assessing in a way that AI can do better, this is the wrong assessment. Stop assessing that way. Because it clearly is going to be part of the lives of the learners in the future. So I'm banning, which, this is not a popularity contest. Quantum Leap 3 was actually about creating the industry of the future. And that was a challenge because we were going to invent what applied research looked like. And we already had space as a flagship area. We have energy transition and sustainability as another area, and we've got funding now from DFAT and the French government to continue on for another 3 years of the energy transition question. And it is not innocent that we are working with the French because we needed to have an agnostic view of where energy comes from. I'm not going to say the N word, but you've heard it. We really need to kind of be somewhat more rational about how we generate, and we will not get green hydrogen until we put all the energy sources in the mix, and some of our colleagues in France are actually capable of doing that. Some of our colleagues in Sarawak are able to do it too. Green hydrogen can be produced with hydroelectricity. So no, it's just about kind of being agnostic and scientific about it. The way we're doing this is actually by acquiring people who are dedicated to applied research. So you may have heard, but just before Christmas last year, the Bionics Institute moved home. It used to be at the University of Melbourne, and very miserable they were there because they, the Brahmins were looking down at them. Oh, you're doing applied stuff. What's your citation like? Well, we actually embraced them because we were kind of thinking, okay, show us your IP. Can we do something with it? What about the stuff? We already have 2 startups from our collaboration with the Bionics Institute. And the stuff they do is exactly what Swinburne does. People and technology working together to assist people living better lives. So they are experimenting with treatment of Alzheimer that comes with electricity. They don't quite know how it works, but it works. It's empirical work, it's based on data, and it will actually make a difference to people's lives. So we are all in, and the Bionics Institute is a kind of demonstration of what you can do when you're willing to rethink what applied research looks like. And then Quantum Leap 4, which is very close to my heart, is to actually declare that the world is our campus. And it means 2 things. If the world is our campus, we're going to take care of it. So we're going to be good custodian, and that again speaks to the sustainability piece. We got to net zero, officially accredited net zero, as of November last year. I think we're the only one to have done that. Yeah. Having said that, this was before we opened the Swinburne Virtual Universe, and whenever I switch the screens on, I'm thinking about the carbon footprint, but never mind. But the Quantum 4 is also expressed by the fact that we have a gloriously booming campus in Sarawak, because the government of Sarawak is somewhat more long-term orientated, and they pay for the tuition fee of all their students. We will get to 6,000 students in Kuching by 2028, and we will get to 10,000 without any problem at all, because they are paying for their young people to develop the skills that they need for the purpose of making all of their nation prosperous. Wouldn't that be nice? Never mind. And of course, we've opened a campus in Qatar. And of course, I got a lot of flack as to why Qatar, aren't you worried about the human rights condition, blah, blah, blah. We actually went into Qatar because they wanted STEM and tech, because they wanted a university that really knew how to do T&E, and because I got them to promise that there would be gender balance. Our first cohort of people, 100 people signed up, 14% of them are Qatari, they're not expats, 40% of them are girls, and they study comp science and engineering. I don't know about you guys, but my modest perspective is that this is how you change the world. You go in there and you educate everyone, including the girls. So Quantum Leap 4 is a declaration that we are a global university, like most universities are, and we do it by not replicating ourselves. We're not completely in awe of our own model that we replicate mini Swinburnes everywhere. We go, and whatever they need, we help them do it. It's called localization in the marketing literature. It's a terrible term, but it means you use your position of global leadership to assist with the local problem. And so in Sarawak, we have a kind of fully fledged, fully active campus in Vietnam, and we have 4 locations now in Vietnam. We're doing different things, and we certainly are working very closely with an industry who needs the talent and offers all the work integrated learning and then recruits all the talent at the end of it. And in Qatar, we are educating the girls. And if we go somewhere else, and I certainly hope that Starship Swinburne will have other locations in the future. I'm really working hard on a campus in Kangaroo Island, but so far the numbers are not working. But this is actually based on the belief that we can deliver a different caliber, a different type of graduate. And we're not even talking about graduate attributes anymore, because that is too vertical. Good communication skills, can work in a team, all of these, it's kind of fine. But we think that actually people are more complex than a few vertical strands, and we talk about a constellation of capabilities. And we like to think about the attitude as much as, we want people who are entrepreneurial, who are not afraid to fail, who are tech fluent and tech agile. And in fact, our whole indigenous dedication is not to kind of make all indigenous people better or more prosperous. It's just to make indigenous people taking them over the digital gap. Because if they do that, then everything else is open to them. So we tend to take a very, not narrow, but very focused perspective. And up to now, that has been working very well. So in terms of my parting words, and I've had so many farewells now, I'm starting to feel that this is a John Farnham farewell tour. I went to Vietnam, every time it's just, I'm not dying. I want to put that on the record. I'm dying, but not any faster than anybody else in the room. What I've learned from the experience is that you need to be genuine when you invite people to the conversation, and they need to see it. In other words, they need to see other people contributing. They need to see that a professor doesn't have a bigger voice than a HEO6 working in an office. You need to kind of get to manifest what it means to be one Swinburne. And I'll give you perhaps, I know I'm going over time, but one of the first decisions that I made when I realized that there were research centers where they had Christmas parties with champagne and canapes, and there were other areas that were having Christmas party with Fanta and Vegemite. I decided to ban Christmas parties because I was really not wanting a popularity contest, was I? So I said, no, we're not going to have Christmas parties because you start mid-November and then the productivity dives, and then there's the Brahmins and the Dalits, and I don't want that. So we're going to have one end-of-year event. I'm paying for the food, I'm paying for the drink, and we all get together on this one day. And the first time people went, and then they realized they were meeting people that had been working at Swinburne for 15 years, and they'd never met them because they were from the vocational part, or they were from that school, or they were from that area. And those conversations were so affirming that actually we are part of the same community, that the second end-of-year event, nobody was accusing me of shooting Bambi again. It was all about, yeah, we can kind of do this. And then we had to put more food trucks because the queues were just longer. And actually the food truck and the queues were a good thing because people were having random conversation as they were waiting for whatever food was coming. And year on year, the end of year event has become such a manifestation of what being one Swinburne meant, that those are simple things, but when you get people to see that you mean it when you say that they're all part of us, that nobody is going to succeed at the expense of anybody else. We all move forward. We're all on that rocket. We're all going to the stars. And the fact that, as I said, as a booster, I'm going to fall back to Earth, doesn't mean that the Starship won't get there, and doesn't mean that I don't want it to get there. It just means that it is the right time for me to step down, which I do with great pride in what has been achieved, with great joy in what the sector can do. I can sometimes wish for a more benevolent government. They keep saying they really like what Swinburne does, and I said, yeah, well, show it, because it's not obvious to me at the moment. Education does change lives. My parents didn't finish high school. I'm a first in family. All I knew when I was 12 or 13 is that I would live in a country where English was spoken, and I would adopt kids, and I ended up, the Vice-Chancellor of an Australian university with 2 gorgeous Indian-born daughters. So my job is done, and it's been a great pleasure to share it with you today.
Questions? Up back there, yeah.
Well, probably first a comment and then perhaps a question. Well, firstly, Pascale, thank you for the honour and privilege to be a part of Swinburne Starship. I think it has been in the past an exciting journey. And want to personally thank you for your leadership. I certainly found it quite inspiring to work with you. So first of all, thank you from my perspective. Second, I guess in terms of question, what was your highlight, I guess in terms of your stint at Swinburne, perhaps not so highlighting as well? If there be reflections that you would take away from things that worked really well, things perhaps that didn't work as well as you would have liked it to, and things that you would probably do differently in that context.
So, is this working? Is this working? No? No? Yes. Is this working? Yes. Look, there are, the first year I decided to launch that Vice-Chancellor Award for failing forward. Nobody put their hand up. And I thought I had to nominate myself. But then in the end, we got a few applications. They were group submission. But the fact that we really made a big song and dance about giving people permission to fail was a big moment. And we also, you have to live by the values that you are sort of extolling. So we are also the only university, I think, that gave a 10% innovation allocation in a workload model. For some reason, Swinburne staff were obsessed with a workload model, as you well know, because we were part of the team that tried to wrangle it in somewhat freer terms. But giving people a 10% workload allocation, academics, a 10%, then we had to kind of confront does working in a community garden count as innovation? No. Growing carrots in your community garden doesn't count as innovation. But the simple fact that we were saying, if you want to take time to think about a startup, or if you want to take time to just reconsider your curriculum or really innovate in that is a legitimate amount of time, and we want you to do it, but if it doesn't work, we also want you to share it. So I think those small moves actually make a difference. I don't regret the circus. I don't regret the language either. Some things I would have done faster. But that's always my default position. I am well known. In fact, when I announced that I was stepping down, I served up what people had heard me say all the time, which is, if it's a good idea, it's a good idea now. And I remember absolutely traumatizing my dean of the School of Design. He came up with saying, we're thinking about this new program, and we think it's going to work, and we think that we can launch it in 27. I went, you launch it in 26, and I support you. If it's not good enough to be by 26, I'm not interested in it in 27. So if it's a good idea, it's a good idea now, which is why when I decided that it was the right time, having delivered the next strategic plan and having formed and handpicked a really good executive team, when I say it's a good idea for me to step down, it's a good idea to step down now.
Thank you. Hello. I've heard you talk a few times over the years, always really inspiring. Full disclosure, I'm from the School of Languages and Linguistics at the University of Melbourne. I have a question. So you talked about global best practice and a world campus. Now, you must know language learning is not just straight language learning. We embed cultural competency in our graduates, and we don't have just students doing majors in languages. We have students doing breadth and coming in, and they do learn these other qualities that help them be global citizens and have that intercultural competency. How do you ensure, given your aspirations for global best practice, that your graduates have those sorts of intercultural competencies? What sort of opportunities do you provide them, or do you use partnerships? I'm really interested to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. And we could have, of course, we could have that conversation in French or Spanish, as you so wish. I am not against languages. Again, remember what I said. Strategic focus means the Excalibur of saying no to things. One of the reasons why we could walk away from Italian and Japanese in Melbourne is because it's taught elsewhere. So there was never any intention to deprive people from the ability to learn languages. One of the challenges, so when I was in my previous institution, I really ramped up the mobility element. We went from 1% of students from the University of Adelaide who went on mobility to about, I think when I left, 19%. So I don't think that you can really teach intercultural competence. You can show what it's like to be a foreigner. And that is a magical moment, because that is a moment where people realize, oh geez, people don't think like me. Oh geez, I can't expect to find this in a pharmacy and this in like, there is a moment where you need to be the foreigner to understand how foreigners feel when they come. That empathy, you can talk about it, but again, you learn by doing. It's by being the foreigner that you learn what intercultural competence is. At Swinburne, as I said, 25% of our students come from year 12. Most of our students are 25 to 35 or older. They have family responsibility, they've got a job. The idea that they might actually go overseas as part of their studies is not necessarily going to be very high. We do certainly embrace the opportunity for them to enjoy what they can learn about indigenous culture in the first place. And we certainly offer all of the other locations that we have. Kuching is a wonderful place. If they want to go and spend, it's Asia light. It's not confronting. The food is delicious. You can actually go and spend some time there, but we know that it is not going to be practical for most people to do that. But we are certainly not anti-language. It's just we're a University of Technology and we know who we are. And actually a lot of our students speak another language than English at home. And that's all part of recognizing that differentiation is also about saying no to things.
You said this afternoon that everybody thought size sold everything during COVID. Yes, but in Adelaide University they still do.
Well, I think they did the wrong merger, but I think that what is needed actually across the country is more dual sectors. The whole harmonization thing, which a few people, including in Canberra, seem to have discovered recently after a career in doing something else. The reality is that we have had dual sectors for some time. The problem that we have is that 4 of them are here in Victoria. So whenever I go and make the case for dual sectors in Canberra, they say, well, yeah, but it's a Victorian thing. It's not a national discussion. And so for that reason, I think that Adelaide would have done very well because they want to become a defense manufacturing state. They would have done very well to merge their TAFE, which was one TAFE, with one of the universities. And I don't really care which one it was, but they would have had a dual sector. The gamble that they made, and Peter Milanauskas was in my marketing class a long time ago. I can't claim to have taught him everything he knows, but he was in my marketing class in his Bachelor of Commerce. The merger that he wanted was to provide the assurance of a top 100 rated university, which is key to the Chinese market, where as a young Chinese person, you won't be able to kind of buy a house in Shanghai or Beijing if you don't go to a top 100. So there's a clear correlation, except that the visa application for China have gone down by 30%. And it was predicated on the financial sustainability that such a large cohort of international students would deliver. International capping is kind of really spoiling the idea, but it's become a political decision.
Warren Bevington had an idea similar to yours when he talked about teaching only small campuses in Australia. For a teaching researcher the optimum size to do what you're trying to do?
It depends how many flagship research area we want to entertain. At the end of the day, we are cutting our cloth. At the moment, it's space, energy transition, and medtech. And we can balance the books on that basis. If we were to want to grow, and our TNE, our transnational education is now delivering a much better margin. Our online learning is now also delivering a good margin. So if we wanted to grapple with another area of research where we felt that we could actually legitimately become world leaders, then it would be worth growing for the purpose of underpinning it. But otherwise, we don't need to. And that's the key to sustainability. You need to be the right size that you need to be to do what you want to do.
Hi, Margaret here again, Margaret Beeman here. Wonderful to hear. And my question, I was really taken by the Excalibur metaphor. If you were to think about the Australian sector and what our strengths were, because you just spoke about it in terms of Swinburne and the Excalibur, how would you characterise Australia? You know, like if you had to say some moonshot focuses for us as a national sort of higher ed sector.
So I think we are in a bit of a predicament at the moment. We have a government that thinks it can regulate and control everything, and therefore, ATEC is yet but another level of of bureaucratic oversight. I can't help, and forgive me, I don't want to offend anyone, but a country of 28 people, managed with 2 chambers of parliament in every state, and then a government sort of overlay, what were we thinking? Now, when it took 2 weeks on a horseback to go from Melbourne to Adelaide, fair enough. But didn't we experience what Teams and Zoom and the hybrid meeting were all about? Like the really brave thing would be to actually properly design what a country like Australia could be like.
2 layers of government is saying,
For example. So after we fix federation, how do we fix the university system? Well, I think there is a benefit for seeing, I mean, there is a parity of esteem. There's multiple problems of parity of esteems. So there's currently a sort of a vocational versus higher education. And I remember having very heated conversation with Duncan Pascale when he was still at the University of Melbourne, where he was saying the vocational preparing people for work, this is not what a university is about, we're preparing people to think and all the rest of it. And I thought, well, this is a bit derogatory in relation to tradies, because last time I thought they also have a brain. But more importantly, if you've got a medical school, you've got one of the most vocational program ever. If you've got a law school, you've got one of the most vocational, like, who said that this is vocational and this is higher education? It's a dichotomy that came from the federal system and the fact that one is state and the other one is federal. What were we thinking? And so in the same way that I really think the danger of AI is people using AI to do all the trivial and silly things that we ended up doing because we were sort of, putting some plaster on a kind of machinery that needed to keep going. What if we actually applied design thinking? What does a country as vast as the continent of Australia, but with only 28 million, sort of mid-sized city in China, if you were to design it now that we don't need to go on horseback from Melbourne to Adelaide, would you really end up with what we've got now? No. Would you really have the university system that we have now? No. Why do we have Australian researchers competing with other Australian researchers to kind of do some research on cancer? Why can't we have one university that specializes on cancer and another one on heart and the other one on diabetes, whatever it is? Can't we carve it up so that we have our people pulling together as opposed to trying to kind of compete for a shrinking pie? It bothers me that people become so obsessed with trying to get something from them there as opposed to really wanting to sort of stretch their thinking about what if we could actually form Team Australia and really make headways on this and really make headway on that. And I think this would be a more encouraging and optimistic thing to do.
Lady on my top right.
Thank you. Sarah Lewis here from Western Sydney University. I'm interested in your challenges in how you make the strategy of a university, your university, my university, unique from each other. I think that if you were to look across the vast number of universities we have in Australia, they're largely indistinguishable from each other. I think if you took off the logo and some of the identifying words, they look quite vanilla. So how have you approached trying to make Swinburne strategy unique? Can you make a university strategy unique? Any tips?
So we didn't actually set out to make Horizon 2025 unique. We just expressed it in a way that was encapsulating what made us different, but also what made our ambition somewhat orthogonal to where everybody else was going. And the strength of the narrative and the strength of a metaphor was something we wanted to carry forward with Ad Astra. I don't know that you'll find any other university that could have one poster that had all of the moonshots on one page. I don't think you'll find any other university that could actually look at the constellation of capabilities and the kind of 4 quantum leaps as, well, some people say it's stars around the sun and other people say it's atoms around whatever. It doesn't matter. It's kind of a visual and strong element. We did not set it out to be different, but it is very different. Now, I remember when I was at the University of Adelaide, one of our alum was the CEO of Singapore Airlines. And I remember when he was talking to the MBA class, he was saying, we never made a secret of what our strategy was. Our strategy was to have better customer service. We didn't mind going to conference and shopping it around because we knew we could do it and they couldn't. So in some ways, this is also the strength of our strategy. I don't mind sharing it because you can't do it, but we can.
Well, sure. Gentleman in the middle, lady top left again.
Thanks, Pascale. So I want to go back to the cities school and the language school. And Swinburne ended up with having a cities school because of its history. This is a Dorking university bringing multiple institutes of education together to make a university. So, and Swinburne is not unique in that regard. There are other universities who are an integration of collection of institutions coming into one pot as a university. Now, my question is, what was different in 2021 that wasn't there in the past 20 years that others didn't really see that Circus School didn't really belong to Swinburne? What was there that others didn't do that suddenly you realize that, oh, you know what, this is out of scope?
Because I think we were called a University of Technology, but people had not actually read that. And because it's very hard to stop doing, like the hardest thing in a university is to stop doing something. Stopping a program, stopping an activity, stopping people from doing the things they've always done is the most difficult thing. I just happen to believe that the most fatal danger is not moving. I don't care whether you jump left, right, forward, backward. Momentum and velocity matters, and it's not just physics. And so the Circus School was actually, when Ian Young was the Vice-Chancellor, Swinburne did try to really connect with that technology element. After that, the university became a bit vanilla. And so being vanilla, it was tempting to be just more of what we do now. And there were a couple of donors, and donors are funny people. They give you, I think in that instance, it was something like maybe 400,000, whatever number of years before, and they feel they own it. And I kind of said, yeah, you can have it back. you own it, you can have it back. I mean, I literally said, we can make it an independent board. It can actually be on its own and kind of grow, thrive, fly of its own thing. Oh, no. So you have to be sometimes very clear about what we're not underwriting it anymore. So for it to be able to be sustainable, it has to be with other performance art, and it has to be funded by the government as an art kind of activity. And so I took it on myself to go and talk to Tony Burke so that he could free funding that could flow to the Circus Institute so that then Collard would be prepared to take them on. And I was very happy to do that. I didn't want to kill the Circus Institute. I just didn't want to underwrite it when the money could have been spent in areas that were strategic. So at the end of the day, you have to be disciplined.
But didn't COVID pandemic actually gave you the barely platform to make those radicals?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, look, I mean, I'm not going to be on record saying the pandemic was a great thing, but very few people have the opportunity of having the case for change so clearly writ large, and then the case for technology not being the enemy of people, but being the friend that kept people engaged socially, that kept people in jobs, that kept people in touch with family back in Europe. Like all of those things, people didn't realize that technology could do that. And I reckon, and I'm prepared to, I can go on public record for that, that if it hadn't been for technology, there would have been riots. There would have been people fighting in the street. There would have been much more mental health damage than what, and it was already traumatic, but technology was a friend of people. So I was lucky to come at a time where I didn't need to make the case for change, and I didn't need to talk about people and technology working together. I just needed to kind of create the confidence in the university that we could kind of stop looking to Melbourne with envy, and we could go that way with determination and courage. And we've stayed in the top 300, and we had a deficit in 2020 when I arrived. We had a right sizing, which I was very clear to never call downsizing, it was right sizing. And we've had a modest but consistent surplus ever since, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. At a time where the sector has been buffeted and red ink has been everywhere. I reckon we could do that as a collective.
Hi, Pascale, ML here. You've been speaking about Swinburne with such passion, about the strategic plan, about how you market it, etc. Our sector needs a new strategic plan for the whole of the sector and some marketing expertise.
Is that a job offer?
Yeah, well, but so what do you think? What should we do for the sector? We have to rebrand ourselves. We're battered and our message isn't getting across. What should we do as a sector?
Well, we should stop being so obsessed with ourselves and think about what we can do for others. The whole governance thing, I'm sorry, but I think, we've taken a baseball bat to minister and say, hit here. Like, why would we actually go and volunteer all of that? There are some universities that are well managed. There are some that are not well managed. I don't see the government kind of accusing a CEO, well, they're starting now. But the point is that as a sector, we need to be more confident about the value we add. And, every graduation, I know what the value of the sector is. Whenever we have a kind of research grant or a research impact, I mean, we had Matthew Bales get the Shaw Prize. It does get better when he gets the Nobel Prize. I really crow, but, the Shaw Prize is not bad. When you see those kind of individual and collective triumphs, that's an affirmation of the good we produce. So I don't subscribe at all to that view of saying, oh, we've got a problem with our social license. I mean, sure, at the moment, it looks like it's a free kick whenever people criticize universities, and the political spectrum is kind of equally sinister. We've got the choice between the plague and the cholera, and now some new type of disease that has just appeared. The reality is that we've got no friends. But the point is this: why do we need friends? We know what we're doing. We know how to make ourselves sustainable, and we know how to operate. So let's do it.
That's all.